Great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview, first one of 2021, always very special. And on the line today, all the way from Spain, I have Rowena Hennigan. And Rowena, I have been wanting to interview you for ages. You are a remote working skills specialist at Row Remote. You have developed an university accredited course in remote work, as well as being a lecturer at the Technological University of Dublin. And you're the author of a book called Better Breaks for Remote Workers, Gentle Exercises to Recharge. Now, given that January, for the theme of the year for January for Collaboration Superpowers is self-care. And I can't think of anybody better to talk to about it than you. But before we get into this whole self-care aspect, I want to ask you, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Well, I've always loved working in a separate space to my home, Lizette. So I love co-working, going out to cafes. My day would look mixed when I first started remote working fully like 4 or 5 years ago here in Spain. But what happened earlier last year, the 4 month lockdown and being confined in a 70-meter apartment with my husband and my daughter has that's a really good question because my profile for that, my needs for that are totally different. I need my co-working space. And I'm very privileged and lucky to be able to go there. And I commuted my 15 minutes this morning walk and I have my separate space. So that is really important to me. My husband does work in an office down the corridor. There are people here, we're wearing masks, there's gel, it's safe, there's partitions and communal areas. But for me, after the trauma of 4 months in a small apartment, I wouldn't be answering a home office again for a while. Some people are very privileged to have a separate shed, as you know, or a totally separate space, but I think the majority will identify with that. And I like the separation, the physical separation between home and work and getting that commute in, even if it's only 15 minutes in the morning. So that's a really good question. So space-wise, location-wise, I love a co-working space. Then around me, I have a standing desk. You can probably tell because I'm standing, which I really love as well. But it's interesting because this will come up maybe a little bit later as well as that. I like to think of my senses. So I actually have a little herbal herbal essence spray here that I'm waving at the camera. So I always have things that I love smell. So I always have things that smell around me to help me because I present live a lot, and I know you know that's tiring too. To present, help me perk up in the afternoon when I need it. And I find smell really does that. So if I had to say the top three things, it would be some sort of oil or candle. I always have lots of pens and papers and post-its. And simple thing, but really important, lots of water. They're
And
my
a bottle with a lid, which is very important. After, if you've ever poured or spilled something on your laptop before, you know that bottles with lids are extremely important.
Exactly. So those three things, I love having those three things around me. And I mean, there's lots of post-its scribbled on here, but that's how I work. I like to write a lot and draw.
Love it. Love it. So it's funny, I can relate a lot to the lockdown and being in the house, although I do have the privilege of having my own separate space and a bigger house and no children. I think that helps a lot because, but still, you know, with my husband, I was still saying like, oh, I really love you, but 24/7 love you is like another story, you know, like that's like, that's like a lot. So I can imagine. So what I'm hearing from people out there is that everybody after 2020 was tired. And when we spoke in December, I was also just at the brink of like, oh man, like I pretty much spent after we spoke the week drooling on the couch. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. Like there's got to be a more sustainable way that we don't reach the end of the year just completely toasted. And in January, I think, you know, everybody thought like, oh, we'll feel refreshed. And then we get the news that, well, actually the lockdowns are being extended. In a lot of places, they're actually being, you know, more, even more restrictive. In the Netherlands, we're getting evening curfews. And I could just feel the collective hearts of the population kind of sinking, like, oh my God, we're still in this. I don't know. There was like this little bump at New Year's where we have this hopeful, like, ah, it's going to be all new. And then we're still in, pardon the language, we're still in the shit. So I'd really like to dive into self-care with you and to talk about like what, as remote workers, what can we do to make our lives more sustainable? Because I don't think productivity is the issue anymore. I think it's well-being is starting to become, and I think you have some data to prove that.
Yeah.
So I know that's sort of a rambling first question, but I'd like to dive into the details of self-care. Where should we start?
So the thing is that self-care and well-being is something we have to build as a skill and practice every day. And people people in our modern world, when we think of all the computers we use, screen time, cumulative screen time, the fact that that keeps us indoors potentially, and also what we are now going through for nearly a year as a global community, the stress, the strains. You need to be we use intentional, and remote work is an overused word, but it's really intentional. Our it's self-care, it needs to be part of your daily routine, but also your personal profile. So what do I mean by that? I mean, it needs to be I mean, it needs to be something you've really spent time thinking about and building out your understanding of it, because often people can answer, using you as the good example, is that they would go for a run as part of their regular routine weekly to keep, the exercise by running. And they can answer one or two key things, but they can't answer smaller activities, right? Smaller break, what they do on a break, say for 10 or 15 minutes. And they can't answer what they're actually building in their self care, what they're exploring, okay, as a new thing. Because given our current environment, what I believe is that we need to be constantly revisiting those activities, how we understand them as bigger chunks and as smaller chunks, and what we do in those times, but also possibly bring in more. It's like a bucket you keep needing to fill up with different things. Because we suddenly could have a pandemic and we can't go outside. So, how can we run? Right? We suddenly have other stresses, right? So, certain self care tools may not be appropriate. This is what we've learned in the last year. And what happened at the start of lockdown was interesting to tie into that is everyone ran to Zoom social meetings, doing their exercise classes online and all these things. But that was just more screen time, Lizette. And then people were talking about Zoom fatigue, because what they actually needed was to be switching off as well. So it's the type of activities, big and small and new, that work for you, in particular, personalized for yourself. But it's also, and I'm a strong believer, and that's why I did the ebook on better breaks, it's away from the screen, conscientiously away from the screen. The neuroscience supports that helps us disconnect and all those things. So does that make sense to you,
Yeah,
Lizette?
and I'm wondering actually, because that is also something that I'm noticing is that we're spending too much time in 2D. It's like, we're in our meetings all day, and in between the meetings, we're checking emails or social media on our phones, and at night we're watching Netflix or YouTube or whatever it is, and suddenly we're like, 16
Mm,
hours a day, really like
exactly.
close to a screen. How much non-screen time do we need? Is that quantifiable, or what are the recommendations out there for those
Well,
breaks?
so the thing is that you can shift to audio for a lot of good calls, just to say, and sometimes people don't think about that. I've done that with my family as a personal example. I don't tend to. We did at the start of lockdown, but we don't now, because I was finding the screen time too draining in my
Yeah.
social hours. But the research, what's happening now, it's the multitude of devices and cumulative, and I haven't seen anything exactly that says it's this or that. But here's what I want to pitch back to you, Lizette. And I said, or answer back, I said about my paper and pen. Have you noticed how you feel after a day of 16 hours of screen time?
Oh yeah, toasted, right?
Toast, toasted, right? So only if we make that personal for someone will we have any chance of change. I could give you I could give you all the stats in the world, but until you maybe spend a week noticing, and you can use apps to do this, your screen time on your cumulative time on your phone, etc., and then go, actually, this is not doing me any good. My eyes are sore, I'm tired, and I'm not, it's impacting me negatively, right? Negatively. And that's what most people find when they reflect in writing, in some sort of journal writing, self reflection. And that is a key part of any self care uh, work I do, either individually or with groups, is building out that personal profile, but then getting them to observe when screen time in general is an issue, getting them to observe the days they have spent long times cumulatively on a screen. And people will come back with their own answer. They'll go, you know, you're right. I picked up a physical book, for example, or I walked, had my lunch without my mobile phone, which I was always doing, scrolling, reading. I picked up a magazine, tangible magazine instead, and I read. And I noticed, and you said it, when I came back to the machine, I was more alert and productive. So it's not about trying to support the time just at the machine. It's often about what you're doing away from the workspace and disconnected. And that, with a couple of my big clients, I think it's into the thousands of people I've connected with over this year on this stress, on these challenges. I'm not saying it's totally right for everyone. That seems to be the common thread, Lizette, that they're not looking at the quality of their self-care and their time away from the machine.
How does one start? Like, first, I would say call Rowena, get a
No,
coaching session. Get
I'm
like,
glad you asked. And I'm going to give anyone who tunes in audio or in video a personalized self-care template to complete, which prompts, it's my gift. You can do it on your own. It prompts under those significant, shorter self-care activities and new activities. Okay. And it also prompts in on how starting to writing down how you can start to bring them into your daily routine. And there's a few other tips in there, because if it's not in your calendar, you know, a lot of the time we need to plan it in as busy solopreneurs, whatever that may be. We need to get into that rhythm. So what works for me is on a Friday morning, tomorrow morning blocked, it's Thursday now, I spend 15 minutes and I am checking next week and the week after to make sure my breaks, my self-care, they're in there. They're in my calendar. And I'm happy to share a sample of that as well.
yeah, I
But
was going to say, like, what do you do personally for self-care? I'm
yeah,
really
yeah.
curious.
So I am luckily able to swim quite regularly because I have a gym and a swimming pool near my home. My commute, my 15 minutes to and back in the afternoon. The afternoon, when I go to collect my daughter, it's more like a 25-minute walk. I take my phone away at night as well. I'm often off the phone completely. I would have books at hand. I like to read physical books. I'm a knitter. I like
Oh,
to knit and crochet. I find that very, very, very relaxing. And I have that profile, but I build it in. So, for example, the commute obviously is part of a ritual. I have to do it to get to my co-working. I don't take my main machine home at night. So I must come here. So I'm not tempted. It's in the co-working, locked away. I'm not tempted to log back on in the evenings. Simple thing, but can be quite powerful. I don't have any notifications on my phone to do with work. I've no work email. Was that? Either of a separate personal account, that on my phone, but not my work one. And then within that day, as I said, I will have my lunch break planned out, and I will have those other breaks in there. And I find there will be days it goes all wrong. There will be days, of course, I'm busy for whatever reason. And this is what people often ask me. They say, but I get distracted and I'm busy. I have already worked through myself, and I have it in writing, what my plan B and C are.
mm,
So I know there'll be a day that it's going to go wrong, that I won't get to the pool. So what do I need to do? So I have a little, and that usually comes in under the shorter activities. And once you've verbally agreed and written that they are your shorter activities you can lean on if you don't get your big activities, then a chapter of a book, your favorite journal or magazine, um, 15 minutes meditating, whatever. I'll do 15 minutes knitting, etc. So that's I lean into those, but I'm also aware, Liz, and this is the sort of psychology coming. There will be days that I don't fully get my big self-care, but what is my plan then? What will I fill in the gaps with? And that's something that tends to work, because people don't, again, and you're looking interested, spend the time thinking that it will go wrong, that they will have a bad day, and
yeah,
then they don't know what to do. And so the day they get to the end of the day and there's nothing, they've done nothing.
right. So then what's the contingency plan? Like, okay, I didn't go to the pool. So that
Ah,
means that if I want to feel
yeah,
refreshed at the end of the day, I'm going to need to take a walk, do some
yeah,
meditation. hot
whatever.
bath, whatever it is for you.
Whatever it is for you. And some of the mentoring I do, we go through that scenario, and then someone will write and reflect on that, and that helps put in a little trigger, a little deep, that when things do go wrong, they go, hang on, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have that long bath, for example, and they put in the plan B. Or if it's only 15 minutes, I know I can read that chapter of a book before I go to sleep, and
Mhm.
it will help me disconnect. So that is, they're the things. But it really, I mean, you can do this on your own, but it really helps to do it with someone from accountability point of view,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? um but that's why I was quite happy to give the self-care template to anyone listening, because you can certainly do it. You can do it with me if you're interested, but I want to give that to people because, as I said to you, Lizette, I really feel this is one of the most proactive, I believe, I know, ways to avoid the burnout, to, as you said, not to get to the end of the year, not to get so many months in and realize you've nothing left to give. There's nothing in the tank.
Yeah.
And if you've got those more regular routine where self-care is a priority in your life, and it needs to have, if it's a priority, it needs to be intentionally planned. It needs to have a profile of Lizette, for example, seeing herself running by the canal, Lizette picturing herself in the long hot bath with candles. Having those visualizations as well will enable you to move to them and actually create that healthy balance for yourself.
Well, I like what you said about maybe bringing in somebody to help you be accountable. Because one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I did over the holiday break was I was watching a YouTube video over dinner with my husband, the Wheezy Waiter. He does all these experiments, like quantified self experiments. It's totally fun. But he had one about a virtual physical trainer. And of course, I was like, my ears perked up because one, I love physical training, and the virtual physical training, that's just my realm completely. And I signed up for the app. And what they do is they pair you up with a real trainer, and he gives me workouts every week. And like we talk back and forth in the app, but I just do the workout. And what I found is I could do this on my own by just watching YouTube videos with my kettlebells, no problem at all. But I wasn't doing it. And now the fact that Cody is going to see when my workouts, if I did not do my workout, even though I know he doesn't really care about me, like, we don't know
Mm-hmm.
each other. He's just a random person that I got paired up with. And, like, I don't really know him, but still knowing that he's going to see that I didn't do my workout. I have not missed a workout since early December, or since
Mm-hmm.
mid-December, like not a single
Fantastic.
one, because it's like there's just this accountability to it. So I love that idea because it doesn't require much, but just a little,
No.
and it becomes a priority in my day. Like now I have to schedule it because Cody's going to see.
Definitely, and that's really good. But actually, because we both want to help remote teams, I've seen this approach work in a remote team setting. I've worked in a team setting where we've shared that type of detail. I've facilitated it using whiteboards and profiles and images of each individual's team's members' self-care profile. And everyone spoke to those different points, the main things, right? The smaller things, what they were exploring. And it was amazing what happened, because then they started being accountable to each other and connections started to be made. Like there was two people who were passionate about bakery who were connecting up in the breakout rooms, sharing recipes. And the thing is that if you're in a safe environment, which hopefully will be with a virtual team, that's, and the culture is good, your virtual team can support you if they know what your profile is and how your profile can maybe come in proactively to support you in times of stress. I've had colleagues say to me, you need to get to the pool. You maybe have, what about getting a run in, an extra run this weekend? That's what we need as well. That type
Right.
of supportive culture with open communications. And so I also want to paint the picture, because it is possible that if this is resonating with people, be open on the teams. And leaders who do this, who talk about what they use to de-stress and how they keep balance, it's brilliant, because you're leading the way fully, properly, honestly, that you bring your full self to work, and that you need these things for the balance as well, that
Right.
you need to be away from the computer completely for a weekend, etc., etc. And some of the big remote companies like GitLab, and GitHub have different programs. Rest Ethic, I know that Log Me In is doing a self-care day that they're gifting to all the home workers at the moment. There's lots of interesting things happening in that space in terms of HR initiatives, but it doesn't have to be that complex. In your small collaborator team or in your team, think about a simple exercise where you share those different types of self-care profile details, share them, and come back to them now and again and support each other on them. It's
Yeah, if
brilliant.
you're lucky enough to be on a team like that, then bringing up this topic can be really helpful. And I would just say, like almost any team right now, bringing up this topic because it does seem like our collective well-being in the world right now has just been 2020 was so stressful in so many ways, and 2021 is looking to also be a bit rough to start. Like we have some political unsettling political situations and climate change and all of these
Mm.
things. So what where would you tell leaders to start? Is it just have the conversation on the team, or what's your
Well,
advice to leaders out there?
well, I get overwhelmed like everyone because, and we were talking before we started recording because there's so much going on. But what have you got control of in the moment? That's what I try and bring it back to. And I think leaders, you do maybe need to hold space if it's appropriate. Empathy is so important. And obviously commentary maybe or open discussion on the environment and what's happening in different regions. That has to be there, of course. But also commentary like, for example, I understand that I can't control a lot of that. I can try and take care and mind myself through my own good self-care habits and plans. And that's where if a leader can share about that and the days where it goes wrong and the progress and the barriers, because that's life, we're humans, what works, what doesn't, and move on from there. I would focus on that type of culture because it also enables very open conversations,
Right.
right? And I'll give you another example of that. There's been a lot of, when there was a lot of talk, Lizette, as well, and a lot of concern about pure social connection for remote teams and enabling that people were feeling lonely and isolated. Isn't it interesting that if you find someone's passion, so if I'm a film buff or a vinyl nerd, and you can understand about that that's what I want to do. I want to reorganize my vinyl collection, right, for an hour a week because that's what helps me switch off and it's part of my self-care or whatever. But if we can get people to open up about that and share something personal, that's sometimes it's not pure social connection, but that's something that gives them a connection, right? It makes them feel connected, right? And I feel I know and I've seen that if we can build that foundation and understanding someone a bit better and their full profile on self-care, that it can make it easier then to move into the harder, maybe more sensitive conversations about stress, burnout, mental well-being, etc.
What do you think the signs are that leaders can look out for on their teams for when people are starting to burn out? Are there things to pay attention to, like common things, or is it pretty unique per team?
No, I think anything out of the normal from any of the training, and I've done some mental health first aid training, just anything out of the normal. So someone say not subtly on video, someone not in context on their team, maybe looking like they're in a darker background or location. Any other significant changes of behavior, quieter, a little erratic, disappearing offline, anything like that, right? Is the signs. That's what they say, right? In terms of,
Okay.
yeah, so looking for behavior that's slightly out of, I mean, there can be various reasons for that. It doesn't have to mean that there's anything particularly wrong. It could be a bad week for whatever reason. But I think that's the starting place. And continuing on then with how to deal with that. If you understand someone's self-care profile and what supports them when they're stressed. So naturally asking, what do you do to switch off? What do you do to relax? What do you do to mind yourself, to take care of yourself? And how does that help you unwind, or how do you see you're opening the conversation there? And I've heard teams and I've facilitated teams that then move on and say, because it's a natural next step, how would I notice that you're stressed?
Hmm,
How
that's a
would you
great question.
how would you exhibit those stress? um for example, I'll share, I know I'm probably sounding quite fast, but I talk very fast when I'm stressed. So the Irish talk fast anyway, but I talk very fast when I'm stressed. So I would happily share that. And I have shared it with collaborators and said, you know, if you hear the voice going quite quick, that could be one of the things. The other thing I do is that when I'm really stressed, is I don't always say no as quickly as I should because I'm so overwhelmed, I haven't processed. So I might
Right.
agree to things quite quickly that I don't really want to do or whatever. So there's little things I know that I'm happy to share with you in this conversation. But teams, if you've got that trust between a team in that self-care profiling process, there could be the opportunity, and especially if a leader has thought this through and maybe had the conversation with a confidant or someone trusted first, maybe they'd like to say, well, actually, when I'm stressed, I've noticed there's this and this that happens. Then you have the open space. Nothing might happen straight away, but you could follow that on with how can we support each other in times of stress? How can we notice the signs in times of stress? How can we proactively before that? Okay. And
Right.
that's where a good leader, I would suggest they hopefully model those types of conversations.
I love it. I love it. So we're building self care as a skill and supporting each other in building those skills, and also to see the signs. Because I also had that before the December break. My graphic designer Alfred, he wrote to me and he goes, "You seem like you're a bit tired. May I suggest taking a long, a long break?" And I wrote back and I thought, okay, now it's serious. Like if Alfred's noticing, like now it's serious. But it was like oh, somebody cared and like checked in, and I
Mm.
definitely appreciated.
Oh, wow. And the thing is, I've also seen it happen with one person who openly shared about a previous experience about burnout on a team. They were part of a team member, and it just changed the dynamic because people were like, okay, this happens. So one of the things about overall mental health, and we're moving into mental health discussions in this though, is that we don't want it to be taboo. We don't want it to be something that no one wants to say. And when you have the one brave, authentic person, sometimes that can really shift the dynamic. Because once it's said, people go, "Well, I'm not, okay. This happens. It's part of life. We all have mental health. We all have mental well-being." And yeah, so you shared with me actually, interestingly, in December. And one piece of feedback I wanted to say to you was, you knew the triggers, you knew the signs, you already were verbalizing.
Right.
You were already verbalizing that, and that's something, and Alfred noticed it too, but that's, and isn't he a fantastic colleague that he suggested that, because that's wonderful. He didn't just say you seem tired, he suggested a piece of action to support you. Take some good downtime, take proper holiday. And sometimes that's, we need to hear that from good collaborators or confidants.
Yeah, and I really related to your have a plan. And so you have a plan B if you don't get to the pool, then
Yeah,
I know what I'm
yeah,
going to do. But I
yeah,
also liked having the plan for if I feel these stress signals, then
yes.
I'm going to. So for instance, I was getting ringing in my ears and I
Mm.
wasn't able to eat. And it was just like, okay, now that I have those stress signals, like those are things that you really need to pay attention to. Now that I have them, what's the plan for when I get them? So I spent the holidays making my plan B for, okay, because I love eating, so if I can't eat, something is wrong, right?
Mhm.
Like that is really
Yeah.
wrong. But like, what do you do when that happens? So then you have to, and what I like about this is that there's a checklist in place, so you don't have to think about it, because in those moments you're not necessarily at your mentally strongest point where you can be like, okay, I'm going to put on the big girl pants. Sometimes you need a reminder to put on the big girl pants. So what I did is I made like a
Oh,
start and a wind down ritual, like just a little checklist. I'm a list person, so just like a checklist, like, okay,
oh,
this is what happened. So I can see that you would also recommend something
yeah,
similar,
totally. And that's really good that you've done that for yourself. Fantastic. Brilliant.
inspired by
And
you.
oh, thank you. But that's great because you did it. I mean, you took it away and spend the time. And that's one of the things I want to empower people, that you like the list, but you've got that sheet there and you could have that pinned up in view, right? But one other thing to think about, that when you say you had the ringing in the ears, or just go into that moment for a minute when you're looking at that list and just ask yourself, what would have helped me? And I kind of hinted at it actually, because I acknowledge stress. Okay, here's me getting into a bit of psychology, right? But I acknowledge stress at times presenting heavy, big sessions. And because I've used certain smells, my body reacts. Like mint will suddenly get, like lavender centers me, right? Mint, I mean, we know this from aromatherapy, we know this from research.
Yeah.
So if you, why not even put in before you get to the stress points? Explore maybe certain music that might help you wind down. Explore smells. Explore maybe water. I mean, water is a big one for me, which is why I like to swim. But like I've even brought in these oils during the day. Sometimes I don't use them, but the fact that they're here is really reassuring. And then we do, like the Pavlov dogs or whatever, we get that response when we spray a smell. We do start to get, oh yeah, that's perked me up because that's what it's done before.
Right. So there's a muscle memory, like a sense
Exactly.
memory.
Exactly,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And and I mean, there's a bit. I mean, music. We were listening to music and create music even before we'd formed proper speech. Music is really powerful in this space, and it's interesting because music is being talked about for productivity, but I'm back to music for me helps me totally at times. Like some classical music will get me. I just go into it. I particularly like with the muscle memory. You said it, of being at live concerts because we can't go now. But I find that if I can listen to music that I've seen live, it brings me my whole body, my whole memory back to that point. And it's one of the
Oh.
things that really helps me disconnect from work, from any stress. So just sharing that because it your whole body, your mind has the memory of being at that concert.
Right. And they're showing, I've been taking the happiness course at Yale that they
Yeah,
offer. It's a free course on happiness. Very fascinating. But they also do show that going back and reliving those
yeah,
moments helps the body to just sort of increase the levels of happiness, serotonin, even though you're not there now, like going back and just reliving, like you
yeah,
said in that experiment.
yeah,
What I
exactly.
like about all of this is that every person has their own, it's like some people smell is not their thing, but okay, maybe music's your thing. And for
Yeah,
some people, like music is like
yeah,
my husband totally is not into music, 3 CDs in his whole life. And I'm like, oh my God,
terrible.
what? I have 3 gigabytes right here. Like, so for some people it's different. So I think that's what makes this whole subject so tricky is that after the basics of self-care, of like sleep, nutrition, and exercise, then what? Right,
Mm-hmm.
like, and those, and not to underestimate sleep, nutrition, and
Mm-hmm.
exercise. Those are huge factors in
Mm-hmm.
self-care, but I think it's the then what that makes it so difficult for so many people. I would think just that one person's with smell, and others with music, and others with, I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, and we have to
But
find that for ourselves.
we have to find it for ourselves, and we're having to find it and revisit it and reflect on it in such extreme circumstances with the thing that we really want to do, like go to a live gig, not possible for us, for example. So we have to go back to it, and that's where you have to be kind on yourself and not judge. Like I would never judge anyone other than maybe the too much screen time. That's the only bit of advice I would go. It's not judgment, it's just going, just watch the screen time if you keep going back to the screens. But it's that you just need to find it for yourself, draw the picture. And one of the things I believe is really important is visualize it. So visualizing the profile. So as I said, we talk about elevator pitches for promoting yourself or business. I'd love to turn to someone and say, in an elevator, if I ever get to go in one again,
Yeah.
and go, what do you do for you? Because those self care, those personal things that help us, they're actually really often who we really are as well. It's what keeps us. It's why we want to do after eating and sleeping. It's often why we want to live, isn't it? We're like out for a run or going for a swim. We're like, this is why I love being alive.
Right,
Often.
those beautiful moments that
Yeah.
yeah, to
Yeah. Yeah.
savor. Oh, I
Yeah.
love it. Then you're really getting right into the core, the essential of the being. Now we're getting really deep.
You
No, but I
well,
can see your point. I can see your point. Like,
yeah.
one thing, like you're overwhelmed by music, another person is overwhelmed, yeah, by
Yeah, well,
food.
whatever,
Yeah.
whatever. But I mean, this is why there's a lot of talk about human-centered leadership, or but this is part of it because now that we are going to be moving to this more virtual world, we're still human beings. We still all come to either the computer or work, and it's whatever about work-life balance. I think it's more work-life integration in terms of what we need to be functional, healthy, content, all those things. All those.
Right. The luxury, or to live a luxurious and thriving
Yeah,
life where
yeah,
we're
yeah,
not in a
exactly.
machine.
We're not in a machine. Exactly. We are a unique and beautiful individual that has these things that we love and that are often our values and reason for living. This is the thing. But
Just small things like that. Just small things like that.
being flippant. But that, yeah. So just in terms of that self care, just one last comment, that apart from the accountability, there's also some tricks of so much of the trade, but just in terms of my experience, understanding the blockers, and you said having the plan B, Lizette, but also if you do a bit of writing reflection over a week where you're bringing in your self care, if you're honestly writing and you get into that rhythm, you also might notice what stops you doing things. What are your barriers? What are your little gotcha points? And that often work with my clients. I find that they, sometimes people know what they have the issue with, and as they do that bit of reflection, and then hopefully once we identify that together, we can work towards it, or at least they come away going, that is one of the areas I have a bit of a challenge in relation to this.
Yeah,
And
and really good to know and define that.
exactly. And just to know that that could be a blocker, whether they choose to do anything about it can be something different. It can be, maybe whatever the reasoning. And I'm not a full psychologist, but that's interesting as well, because it is a personal choice at the end of the day. It's a personal choice whether you choose to move to this way of considering your well-being.
And that's another thing that I think makes it very difficult, is that in the end, it's not up to our employer or our colleagues or our partners to take care of us. In the end, self-care it's in our own hands. It's our own responsibility. I guess that's the good part and the bad part. The bad part is it's our own responsibility, and the good part is it's in our own hands and we know what's best for
Exactly.
ourselves.
Exactly. And just to add to that, what's in our own hands at the moment in the world after 2020 and into 2021. So I try and flip it around to go, I'm privileged, I'm able to go and do this self-care today. I have my health, I can access these things. There will be the days it goes wrong, but I try and see it in the global context, and that helps me to honor it and to value it.
Right, to keep it real. Because at the end of the day, indeed, we are in luxurious, privileged positions to be able to worry about our self-care in such a way of
Yeah.
like, did I get my hot bath today? Whoa, the bourgeois suffering, right?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. But yeah, so yeah,
Put it in
but
context.
we still, I like to enjoy it and I deserve it. That's the other way of looking at it. When you,
Absolutely. And I like that. I like that as well. I like that as well. So, Rowena, it has been a real honor and privilege to speak with you today. Thank you so much for your time. And to everybody listening, have good self care.
thank you, Lizette.